Everyone, and welcome to episode 39 of Diabetics for Diabetics Radio. Today's episode is titled Bowie Goes to the Chiropractor. We're going to talk all about my recent excursions, my recent investment in chiropractic health, spinal alignment, and making sure that everything in my body is conducive to having my pancreas, my liver, my whole nervous system in general functioning at tip-top shape. So, if we have not met yet, my name is Bowie. I've had type 1 diabetes for over 22 years. I am healing naturally and sharing information as I go. About 2 years ago, I decided I didn't want to have diabetes anymore. And so I invested my time, my energy, just about my whole life into learning more about the disease, more about the things that I could be doing on a day-to-day basis. And it has just blossomed into this beautiful research project, this community of like-minded people with not just type 1 diabetes, but with autoimmune conditions in general, chronic diseases in general, looking for better, looking to do more for themselves, for their health. And so here we are, episode 39 already. I'm really excited. Let's go ahead and start talking about it. So a lot of people have preconceived notions about chiropractors, the study of chiropractic medicine, and how useful it is. And I was one of those people. I still, I've heard more bad stories than I have good stories. I come from more of an athletic background, so a lot of my previous experience, not actually going to the chiropractor, but hearing from people who went to the chiropractor, had to do with healing from sports injuries. And so much of like that type of physical therapy seemed like a dead end. I heard of so many people getting treated and not liking it, or it would be good immediately after the adjustment, but then nothing would change over time. It was just a bunch of isolated adjustments that never actually amounted to help. So when the idea came across to pursue something like this in the name of healing diabetes, I didn't really know where to start. So I decided to dive in a little bit on like, why would this even be a good option for me? And so it turns out there's kind of a lot. So for subluxations, nerve impingements, and energy flow. So a subluxation is basically if you have one vertebrae and another vertebrae and they are out of alignment, right? They're not lined up perfectly. They're kind of off. That can cause pinching of nerves. It can decrease the power of the impulse for whatever nerves are kind of pointing out from in between those vertebrae. And this can affect organ health. This can affect blood flow, circulation, your ability to breathe and move properly. So it has major implications bodily wise, organ wise, tissue wise, cell wise. So focusing on autonomic nervous systems and vagal tone. Vagal tone is an important part of all of this. Vagal tone refers to the vagus nerve, which is basically this huge, wide, big nerve that branches off into a million different pieces, kind of starting up in your C-spine and down through the rest of your body. It regulates your autonomic nervous system, which is basically like your automatic nervous system, digestion, breathing, intestinal flow, everything. It's so important, and I encourage you to look more up about the vagus nerve, vagal tone, and its ties to diabetes, and the manipulation of fascia for people with diabetes. So obviously we've talked about how muscle tissue is a huge promoter for health in people with diabetes for insulin sensitivity's sake and glucose uptake. But fascia is this kind of distinct tissue type that is throughout the spine and your skeletal system that has a lot of really interesting components that don't just tie to the physical kind of holding up your skeleton, but also the emotional side of things and the nervous system regulation side of things in terms of nerve impulses and the connection between traumatic emotional experiences and how those physical things manifest or how those emotional things manifest in the physical body. So kind of fascinating, right? And the real reason why this became so interesting to me is because of the article I read about a boy who was quote unquote cured of type 1 diabetes through a lot of alternative health therapies. And I did an episode where this article was mentioned more in detail, episode 29. And there was this young boy, I think he was 11, 12, or 13. And his parents went through all of these alternative therapies, cleaning his kidneys, cleaning his liver, mineral baths, what have you. And going to the chiropractor was one of the things that they mentioned. So you can see here, I have it highlighted. They went to a chiropractor who mentioned that areas of their son's spine responsible for innervating the pancreas were out of alignment. And that adjusting to improve alignment could improve the function of the organ. And so, this could be, at face value, it could be just a good sales pitch. I'm not above, I'm not just like instantly taken by this, but in the name of this journey and crossing off all the things to say that I at least tried it, I wanted to learn a little bit more. So that's kind of how we got here. So here we are. Now, there are plenty of maps. You can go to Google right now and search in Google Images like spinal innervations with organs, spinal pancreas connection, lots of different things. And it turns out that your thoracic spine, which is the middle part of your spine, it goes cervical, thoracic, lumbar. Those are the three main. Sacral is at the bottom. There's a couple small vertebrae, your tailbone down at the bottom, which is sacral. But your T-spine, thoracic spine, is a major center for all of the nerves for your digestive organs, your liver, your gallbladder, your pancreas, and your GI tract. And so I kind of wanted to focus on, okay, do I have anything going on in that thoracic region? And then on a more broader scope, just the overall health of my nervous system. How well is the circuitry on my circuit board flowing and connecting in connection with making sure that all of my body systems are operating properly? Think of the body like a fuse box, and each, you have all of these switches correlating with different bodily functions. Is somewhere in my fuse box, is there a pancreas fuse that has blown and it needs to be reset, realigned, what have you? It's interesting. It's at the very least something I wanted to learn a little bit more about. And there are. So it turns out that the pancreas kind of has a very specific place in the T-spine where the nerves bringing information from the brain, directions from the brain actually leave the spine. And that's T6 to T8. T stands for thoracic and kind of in that mid-back area. The liver, same thing, T7 to T10. And then in the cervical, so up kind of towards your head and your neck, C1 to C8. Those are a lot of the more foundational aspects of living, like breathing, like your heartbeat, like digestive impulses and things like that, kind of coordinating all of the major things keeping us alive. And then from a systemic point of view, the sympathetic versus parasympathetic systems governing the autonomic nervous system, kind of the automatic side of things. So this is kind of like the fight or flight, the rest and digest balance that we have going on. I don't know if I've mentioned it specifically before, but chronically I err on the side of sympathetic. I tend towards hypervigilance. I tend towards kind of always being on and having a hard time turning off, as opposed to the other way around. And this has major implications for our digestion, for our ability to absorb the nutrients that we're taking in from our food, our hormonal profile. People who are overly sympathetic tend to have higher adrenaline and higher cortisol, which has a major systemic effect on kind of your kidneys and your electrolytes. So there's a lot to this. And so when I started to see how well documented all of this was in the research, I wanted to transpose it over my own experience. And so that's how we got to where we are right now. So I kind of did a quick audit of, okay, what do I look like? What is my spine telling me? How has it impacted how I've lived my life? First thing that came to mind was I have always been a baseball player. I played ever since I was, 5, 6, 7 years old. And so baseball is a violent rotational sport, right? You're whether you're throwing or you're hitting, you are constantly spinning violently. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe this had some sort of impact on my spine. Maybe it threw it out of alignment. Maybe I'm kind of imbalanced because of it. Plenty of people know that repetitive sports, explosive sports can have effects on your body's balance. I mean, if you look at a pitcher, where their shoulders sit, and we'll look at myself in just a little bit. Runners, sprinters have like very forward tilted hips. All of these things that are, may have physiological and bodily impacts. I have a family history of scoliosis. I have one aunt on my father's side who has severe scoliosis. She actually has to wear a brace. Both of my sisters have been treated for scoliosis. I personally never got diagnosed because I didn't exhibit the same symptoms that my sisters did. But like we'll see in a second, doesn't mean it's not there. I do have some abnormal curves in my spine. And then persistent knots. And this is kind of the one thing that kind of made my ears perk up when I was reading about it. I have these very tender spots in my mid back that have always been there. I always attributed it to baseball, to my athletic activity, and was just kind of like this, this kind of like itch I could never scratch, the knot I could never quite get out. But it's in that lower thoracic area, in that kind of T6 to T10 area that correlates with the liver and the pancreas. So I was like, maybe there is some sort of correlation there. And then just my overall posture. Like a lot of people who grew up with phones or looking at the TV, their head is kind of jutted forward. And when you jut your head forward, you create compression in your neck. And I definitely do feel that, whenever I kind of like pull on my head this way, it always feels like I need more space kind of on that backside of my head. So I figured, hey, let's take a closer look at all this. And then I actually took pictures. So this is from today. I am making this podcast episode in the beginning of May. While I was making this podcast, I was like, hey, let's get a live picture just so we can take a look at things. And I was like, holy hell, look at how crooked I am. And so this is from the front. So you can see here on my left shoulder how much higher that left shoulder is from the right. And then if you trace from my chin, you can kind of go down my Adam's apple and down across my body, down to my belly button. You can kind of see this, it's bowed, right? When you look at my head and you kind of go right over down through the center of my hips, everything is kind of swayed to the right of that line. And I don't feel that way, you know. I don't feel like I'm crooked like that. But looking at this picture is like undeniable. There is a huge a bow. Bowie has a bow in my spine here, and we will see on the next slide when we look at my back how prominent the S curve is and how much more there is going on the back side than the front side. Okay, so just mapping everything out here, right? Same thing, going from kind of where the center of my hips are. If you trace a straight line up, my head is way far right of where that center of my hips is, right? And it's like, okay, well, how am I getting there? Just like the picture before, that left shoulder is significantly higher than my right shoulder. And then this is kind of just a loose outline of what my back looks like, or kind of like how I imagine the line of my spine. But I have that S curve at the top, right, from here to here. And then I have the bow at the bottom as well. You have this guy here. So you have this loop up to the top. And all of the resulting changes in the shape of my torso as well, right? So if you kind of look at this like a trapezoid, this line up here is way tilted here, and that's causing different sizes. You look at the size of my right lat compared to my left. So if we want to think like this right here is compressed, this right here is kind of expanded, and these arrows here are exactly where I feel that those knots, those chronic knots that I'm never quite sure how to get rid of. They don't bother me at rest. But if you were to at any point take your thumb and kind of dig at them, I'd be like, whoa. It makes perfect sense when you place them on those curves, right? Think about how much tension is kind of digging in right there because you have that S curve. It's just so fascinating. And I'm not using this as a diagnostic. I'm not a doctor by any means, but there's something going on here, and this all makes so much sense to me. How it correlates to diabetes, not 100% sure just yet, but worth taking note, worth setting a foundation so that when I go through my chiropractic treatments, I can kind of measure progress. And so here I am from the side. This was a good visualization of kind of that cervical compression. So this is kind of where, I'll need to kind of stretch my shoulders out a little bit. This is where I'm feeling that compression. And then I've always had this. It's never been a problem for me. Occasional lower back tightness. Sometimes when I squat, I'll feel a little bit more pressure on this left side than I will this right side, which again, this makes complete sense too, because you see that line down at the bottom would lead you to believe that left hip is probably taking a little bit more of the pressure than the right side. But I do have a pretty strong tilt forward, right? You see my hip, my butt kind of sticks out. But food for thought, right? Just kind of things to think about. And so I took all of this information that I found on my own, and I brought it to a professional. So my older sister, who was diagnosed with scoliosis, had found a chiropractor that she enjoyed, and she made a recommendation to me. And so I looked her up, I looked into her, but I wanted to make sure that I had a couple of things that were couple of boxes that were being checked off before I got into it, because what I didn't want to happen was all of the horrible stories I had heard from my sports performance days, which is like, oh yeah, I went to the chiropractor, felt good for a day, and then it was back to normal. I wanted someone who was inclusive of food, diet, mental health, movement practices, and knowledge of the body, beyond just like, okay, I'm going to adjust your C-spine and your T-spine, but I don't really care how you throw, walk, whatever. I wanted someone who I could form a relationship with for a long-term plan, because as you guys can see, like the way my spine has completely morphed how my body has put on muscle, how I carry weight. This isn't something that, you snap your fingers and can kind of like force back into play. So I wanted someone who I could talk to with a long-term plan, who wasn't going to sell me on the quick fix, but who also wasn't going to like take me for a ride and say like, okay, well, 5 years from now, like, can we talk about this and have an educated conversation? And the last point there, who's going to respect the knowledge that I'm bringing to the situation? From a physical standpoint, I have diabetes and this is what my interests are and why I'm doing this, and respects my ability to learn and understand the things that you're talking about. Like, I don't want a health professional who's just going to talk down to me and not listen to what I have to say or value my experience and what I'm feeling. So, and those were kind of all the things that I was interested in. And I was so fortunate to find the practitioner I did, because she checks all these boxes. So I'm currently about a third of the way through my 12 to 14 week program right now. And I'm going to share the initial tests here, so that a couple weeks from now, when I redo this and kind of look at all of my results, we'll have something to look back on. But on my initial evaluation, my initial diagnosis, these are what her tests found. Cervical compression, right? That's kind of I kind of knew that, right? The forward head posture, kind of always wanting to stretch out the back of my neck. She was specific about where the subluxations and possible compressions were. T4 and T12, these are kind of surrounding that magic pancreas and liver area in the thoracic spine areas. T4, T12, I don't know, maybe. We'll see. I trust her knowledge in that, and I'm curious to see how upstream and downstream of these possible subluxations might influence those in-between areas. My sympathetic nervous system is overactive. I could have told you that, kind of that monkey mind, the overactive, hypervigilant, runaway mind, as opposed to the rest and digest relaxation mentality. And my body itself, beyond just my mind being overstimulated, there was a lot of energy being spent on postural stability. And when it comes to an inflamed or a healing body, this is very important, because our body has a finite number of resources. And so what are the things that basically I'm spending a lot of money, currency in my body, on just staying upright, when in reality my body needs that energy elsewhere, whether it be for food, making insulin, making beta cells, what have you. So there is a little bit of energy mismanagement in terms of keeping me upright. And she had a couple of these really neat tools to measure that and kind of put a number on things. And so adaptability reserve was one of these things. Again, I am not a professional she and I spoke about each of these particular tests that I'm going to talk about, and this is my understanding. So take this with you if you ever end up looking into a chiropractor. Mention these types of metrics and see if they kind of have an understanding of what we're talking about. But when you look at this graph in the upper left-hand corner, you have this y-axis, you have this x-axis. Y-axis, to the right of the y, is parasympathetic, right? So this is someone who has difficulty turning on. They're kind of slow, sluggish, not quite active. Sympathetic on the left side is someone more like myself who is overactive, possibly. And then the x-axis is the adaptability ability, right? So the higher you are on the graph, the more reactive, the more adaptable your body is to stresses, to changes. That's a good thing, right? We want someone who is adaptable. For those who are below that x-axis, that is someone who is kind of stuck, who isn't able to adapt and adjust to changing circumstances. And that's where illness can come into play. That's where a lack of healing comes in, because your body isn't able to handle the changes that it needs to. So I am this little white dot just on the outskirts of that yellow circle. Green is ideal, right? You kind of have that balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic, and you are adaptable. I'm above the x-axis, so I am kind of adaptable. I'm showing the ability to change. However, I am overly sympathetic. So this is taxing in a way that is not allowing my body to properly recover. Fascinating. This next test had to do with measuring the energy flow in the different aspects, in the different levels, and the different sides of my spine. So postural energy. Each bar correlates with a section of the spine and its energetic activity. Red bars indicate a heavy taxation, so that part of the spine is working very hard in just working, upright, what have you. So just awful efficiency, right? The ideal number is 100%. I'm at 24% efficiency. So the goal is to get all of those bars smaller and more equally balanced on the same side of the spine. So you can see here, I've got big bars, red bar up in that kind of upper right cervical, that my mid spine is all lit up, but only on one side. You see here that kind of mid back on the left side, there's almost no energy being spent there, which isn't necessarily a good thing, right? We want a moderate amount of activity just to kind of be on both sides, so that one side isn't always on and one side is always asleep. And then that left hip tends to be bothersome too with some of my weightlifting, but there's a lot of energy being wasted here, being spent on keeping me upright. Kind of interesting to see. Next test was thermogenic scan. So this is measuring the actual temperature showing on either side of my spine. And this is like really wacky. So you can see the kind of curve I naturally have. The curve of one side being very, very on and one side being very, very off, which is not great, right? We're looking for balance. So we're looking, that mid back is really on, that left side cervical is really on. We want to kind of marry the two and have the opposite side of my cervical turn on a little bit more, the left side of my mid back turn on a little bit more. This can also be, this is the thermogenic scan can also be a sign of inflammation. So I have inflammation going on in that upper part of my neck. Couldn't have told you about it, but when you look at my back, it's really not surprising because of how kind of jacked up that left shoulder is. So 5 out of 25 measurements are outside of the normal range. This means that my body is not regulating itself as efficiently. And so I'm looking to activate where it is inactivated and tune down the overactivation in those hot spots that I have going on. Now, I thought it was interesting. I kind of wanted to overlay all of this with the actual pictures. You can kind of see there's just a lot of work going on up here. That tilt, we know from the side view that I have a lot of compression going on up here as well. This right side, so if you like T4, which is where the chiropractor found the subluxation, is somewhere around here. T12 being somewhere down here by where I have those knots. This side is all fired up. This side is almost completely inactive. This is all fired up, much more so than this side. And the same goes for the thermogenic scan. So this, look at how like tight and compressed this is. That's how it's reading on the scan. Same thing, kind of on the compression stand front. I'm compressed on this side of my spine. It reads that way, and kind of all the way down. That's funny. It mirrors that S curve I have going on all the way down. So as a result of these treatments that I've been getting, these adjustments, some of them are manual, where she's actively kind of like pulling and cracking. There is some, like a massage gun. She's gone all through my chest, my psoas, my solar plexus, kind of getting everything loosened up and ready to be adjusted. After my first 2 or 3 visits with her, there was an extreme and noticeable difference in my insulin usage. I was using significantly less insulin. My insulin sensitivity was much improved. Those trends were transient, so it did not persist that way. I've kind of returned back up to the mean, but this is not the first time that has happened with a treatment, not just with her, but with, supplements, what have you. And all of these are signs to me that this is of value. This is a brick worth using in the foundation, right? If I did it and I saw absolutely no change at all, it may be something I move on from. But that little kind of glimpse of change let me know that it does have a positive impact. Now it's just a matter of long-term exposure and any possible tangential interest that I can kind of branch off from this. I have noticed, just from a physical standpoint, an ease in tension in my C-spine, as well as those spots on my low back. They're not gone, but like I said, I don't expect this to go away overnight. But things are definitely shifting, and I can feel them from the way that I move, from the way that I lift, the way that I throw, what have you. So all things that are positive in my mind. There have not been any drawbacks or negatives to note of yet, besides some occasional soreness that does not last too long. So for the future and what you can expect to hear from me in regards to this whole project, I ordered a 12 to 14 week treatment schedule. So I'm going 3 times a week to be adjusted. I'm having these tests done, these evaluations done every 4 weeks. So I'll do one at the 4-week mark, I'll do one at the 8-week mark, and then we'll have the final evaluation after the 12 and the 14 to see how far I've come. I have continued all along with the same exercise routine. I'm still lifting weights. I am eating the same way. I am supplementing the same way. I've made sure that she be clear with me if I do need to make any adjustments. But as of right now, I'm allowed to continue forward as I was before. And I'm excited for what comes of this. Both, I mean, from a lot of different things. From a movement perspective, I'm a huge mover. I like to lift. I like to hike, move. Being comfortable kind of standing without getting cricks in my neck and that soreness in my low back. Obviously, from the diabetes standpoint, that is my main motivator. How can this help me manage my blood sugars? How can this help improve pancreatic function, liver function, digestive function? And then from an education perspective, how can I share what I'm learning, all of the different factors about this project? How can I share this with people who can take it and run with it on their own, right? I cannot be the only person with diabetes who is dealing with these compressions, subluxations, and kind of misalignments that are affecting their ability to metabolize glucose. So with that is the end of episode 39. I can't thank you enough for being here with me. I'll have links in the description for my supplements, for my educational resources, my nutrition guide, supplement and herbal guide, an Ironclad Cause, which is my ebook talking about iron overload, inflammation, and the development of diabetes. And if you're not already, subscribe. Follow me on TikTok. I have a Discord as well. That will all be in the description as well. And share the word, spread the mentality that we may have diabetes right now. That does not mean we will have to have it forever. We have to keep looking. We have to keep talking about it. We have to work together. So with that, thank you so much for being here. Episode 39, Bowie goes to the chiropractor. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.